Hello and welcome to the whole conversation in 20 minutes or less, where we explore humanity's creative potential, ground the force of love, and embody the ethos of whole. Today I have Carolyn Anderson and Sanford Anderson here talking about global family. Welcome to you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Global family. I love the name. I love the name of Global Family, and I love your work and your voices in the world. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Global Family first off?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll begin. I'm one of the co-founders of Global Family. In 1986, the organization came out of something called the World Peace Meditation, which happened on December 31st of that year. And that was the vision of John Randolph Price, to have 20 million people all envisioning world peace at the same time. So I was living in Palo Alto, working with a team of people, and eventually we had about 80 people who would come together every other Wednesday night at the local Unity Church. And these people were getting so empowered and so nurtured by this sense of community that they said to me and to the other person who was officiating there, could we continue after December 31st? So we wrote out the vision statement for Global Family, and on January 1st of 1987, we launched Global Family. And our vision has always been supporting the shift in consciousness from separation and fear to unity, love, and co-creation. And we've been very consistent with that for over 30 years now.
Beautiful. So how do you do that now? How does it look now? It's moved from this church and these 80 people gathering to what? What's Global?
What? Well, it's always been a very loose international network of people, people like you and me, Julie, and Sanford, who are, call us cultural creatives, people who are committed to positive transformation in the world. And in those early years, for the first decade, because it was before the internet, it all happened just very organically. It still does, but very organically, just word of mouth, people catching the vision of, yes, I want to shift consciousness to unity and love. So in 1983, Sanford and I had been managers of Barbara Marx Hubbard's political campaign for a positive future. And it was at that time that the process that we use within Global Family, which we call the core group process, it's basically co-creative principles and practices, was revealed to Barbara and me during that campaign. So we brought all those practices into Global Family. We felt that that was definitely one way to shift consciousness. And we knew that another way was through these large global events like the World Peace Meditation. So we got involved with Harmonic Convergence as being a communication hub, attracting other people to be part of that activity. And then it just evolved organically. We had lots of surprises in those early years. Did a lot of citizen diplomacy in the former Soviet Union, did a lot of facilitating international peace conferences, because Global Family, our focus has always been on process. It's always been on co-creative principles and how do we flatten the hierarchy? How do we empower individuals? And then we've gone through a regenesis in November of 2015 with the terrorist attacks in Paris. The impulse came through me that, you know what, we need to start forming these groups again, supporting the formation of these groups, because what the planet needs now is more love, more creative expression, more personal empowerment. And we knew that this core group process was a way to do that. And then at that point, Sanford had come back into my life. We had been married for 20 years through the 64 to 84, and now we were back together again. And what Global Family is up to is so aligned with his purpose. Which,
yeah, through a different route, I had become just acutely aware of how, like Einstein says, you can't solve problems at the same level, of consciousness that created them. And that just seemed so obvious to me of the importance of shifting consciousness. So it fits, hand in glove with what Global Family has been up to. But I became just very focused on how to support a critical mass of people to sustain a higher level of consciousness. And I looked for ways to do that. Couldn't find them at first. And now the core group process seems like such a perfect way to do that, that I've become, very, very involved with Global Family.
Beautiful. Tell us more about the core group process, because I think that's really important. We have people gathering all over. We have people wanting to do more who might not have a community of people. But that core group practice, from my experience in working with different groups and organizations and coming together, when we have core group practices, it's more sustainable for the people. I've been meeting with a group for over 5 years, and we have a core group practice that keeps us coming back every week. So tell us a little more about that.
Okay, well, I'll do a little plug here for the book that Catherine Roski and I rewrote last year, Co-Creators Handbook 2.0. And over all these decades, the Global Family has had 5 different guidebooks like this. The first couple were all about resonance, creating group resonance. But since the third book, which was The Rings of Empowerment, we've laid out this process. And what we've learned is that, this process was revealed to Barbara and me. We didn't make it up. I found myself doing the elements of the process. So some of the key elements are, first of all, making that internal shift from ego to essence, stabilizing as our authentic self. And that's something that for most people takes many, many years. It just is, one doesn't drop the ego overnight, and one never drops the ego. Ideally, I think in a whole human being, the essence of who we are shines through that personality self. And so that gives us our uniqueness, our individuality. But another core principle of the core group process is creating group resonance. Everything we do is based on heart connections. Heart connections, connections to the essence that we are, to the essence of others, and to life in nature. So that's the co-creative principle. And then one of the other important practices is we have a circle in the book called Overcoming the Illusion of Separation. We have to have communication skills to get back into resonance with other people if we feel out of sorts, or if we're judging another person, feeling angry, whatever it is. We need to have those tools to come back into that perfect alignment, essence to essence. So those are some of the principles. One of the things we've learned is that the ego cannot co-create. That's why it's so important to stabilize as the essential self. And also, you can't have co-creation if you're not in resonance. So without that heart connection and that field of trust and safety, which is where the intelligence of either the dyad or the group is held, you can't have co-creation. So we've learned a lot. We've been living this for 30 years. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Sanford and I connected with our good friends, Catherine and Makasha Roski, and we created a for-profit business called Living Co-Creation, where we're sharing these practices with others through consulting and through trainings and so on.
Yeah. I really honor what you do for co-creation on the planet. Everywhere I'm going, I'm hearing that word co-create, and yet many people use it differently than your intended definition and Barbara Marx Hubbard's intended definition. And everywhere I go, I bring that back in. I'm like, well, let's look at the and I'll tell you what Catherine and Carolyn say, and I get to teach your definition everywhere I go, because a lot of people are thinking, oh, cooperate, collaborate. So thank you for holding that process and that ideal for so many years and practicing it.
Yeah.
Literally, you've been in practice of this for a very long time. So I honor you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing it. Thank you for, we're all ambassadors. In fact, in Global Family, we have a program called the Ambassadors. In the early years, we called those people area coordinators. And they were people who self-selected wherever they were in the world, and they had to be at least with one other, because it's all based on co-creation, or with a team of people. And these are people who just hold this impulse, the vision and the mission of Global Family at the local area. So Yeah, we have a group of people now called ambassadors who we connect with on a regular basis.
Nice, thank you. Well, we'll have that website in the description below so people can go there and click on that and explore what we're talking about here. So let me ask you a few questions. Since we love to explore humanity's creative potential here, what's your vision for a positive future? What's your vision for humanity's creative potential?
Well, I'll begin. My vision is that I believe that every human being is a master in some arena. Each one of us has something that I feel we're coded with. We come in with, whether a musician, an artist, a business person, whatever it is. And so my vision is that every human being on this planet would be fully empowered to be in touch with that mastery and to be giving their gifts. And I feel, for me, that's my definition of heaven on earth, or that's a whole system. When each person is contributing their finest, their best, and their most joyful, because that's the thing about co-creation. It's fun, it's enlivening, it's joyful to really be giving your gifts. The heart wants to serve, the heart wants to give. And so that's my vision. We're all playing our role and we're fully empowered and we're having a good time.
I love it.
What I'd add to that is that what I have experienced in being in touch with the deepest parts of myself in groups with others is that it gives me access to more of who I am than I can simply by myself. And this is the importance of core group process and working in groups of people to empower the group to far more than the sum of the parts. And that's why I just am, so engaged, I would say, with the work of Global Family, because I think it is an important direction and an important vehicle for bringing together what we've spoken already here.
Yeah, and Julie, going back to an early question you had about the core group process, two other elements that I think are really critical. I mean, there's 10 steps in the process, so they're all important, and it's a whole system, so it's not a linear model. But one is the practice of inner listening, that learning to look within for our guidance. As we are divine intelligence in person. So stopping the practice that we all learned, most of us learned as children, looking outside for authority to looking within. And then through this process, one of the things that organically happens is coming in touch with our deeper purpose. And then the next step in the process is finding those perfect partners, who are the people who we are meant to work with, which we're modeling right now. You have your work, which is totally aligned with our work, and here we are co-creating something new and different coming together. This is an organic part of this process.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. So for those listening who may be just learning about these different processes and just waking to this idea that I am this divine essence embodied, what might you share with them? We talk a lot at Good of the Whole about embodying this ethos of whole, our wholeness. We already are whole, and we're whole beings within a greater collective whole. What would you say? What might be something you would recommend to our listeners to assist them in embodying their wholeness now?
Wow. Well, I know that each one of us is very unique, so we each have our own unique path. This is why inner listening is so important, because that's how we access the guidance for ourselves. Knowing what is our next step. I will just share that for me, meditation has been very important. Being in small groups, starting with an attunement and a check-in, learning how to create a safe space in a group and be authentic, be vulnerable, share deeply with other people, and then spending time in nature. I think nature is such an important teacher for embodiment, for making all of this real in our lives. But I would say, bottom line, learn to listen within and follow your own unique guidance.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would add to that, in addition, I think the HeartMath processes are so valuable and so fundamental. And that has been an important part of my path. And I just add that as another resource.
Beautiful. I'll put that in the links too, but Sanford, do you want to say something about that? Because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of research on HeartMath, but basically what you're talking about is they have some techniques like the quick coherence technique of
Right.
how to create this resonance within, which then can create resonance.
Right. Yes, I'm very simple, very, universal, ancient techniques, actually. What HeartMath has added to that, I think, is their research to demonstrate objectively the effectiveness and the power of these techniques and their use of biofeedback, which is commercially available, which I use. Because otherwise, I find that I can lie to myself about how far into coherence I am. But if that's not what the feedback is, then that gives me another input that I wouldn't otherwise have.
Nice. All righty. Thank you. So, like literally, these we've been talking about really grounding the force of love. You guys are doing it, and you're offering so many opportunities to do that, including your work with the Roskis with Living Co-Creation. So finally, I'm going to ask you one last question. Okay, the world is in change. The world, there's so much going on, and we're talking about coming together, creating resonance, so many beautiful antidotes to help us really weather and become more whole through this change. But maybe you want to share the role of global family, living this co-creative life. What advice might you give when we're looking at global change and the shift of consciousness on the planet and all the upheavals, all these breakdowns? And I know there's lots and lots and lots on the news. We can get addicted, like we talked about in a prior conversation, to what's going on and following the crazy, chaotic, all of that noise. But what might you say to our listeners about really navigating through this change?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for all of us during these transformational times is to have a sense of deep community, deep support. This might be as simple as one other person in your life, but ideally it would be a small core of people who you really trust, who you can call on, who you feel aligned with in your values, in your consciousness. And I would recommend that if anybody feels attracted to this work, get a copy of the book and create a little core group. Call a couple of your friends who you feel aligned with and start meeting on a regular basis, supporting one another in that way. I feel like this is the time to reach out and touch hands and hearts and feel like we're being supported through these turbulent times.
Beautiful.
For me, another aspect of this is so often the question comes up, what can I do? And to me, the perfect answer to what can I do is, what do I feel deeply led to do? And that is what the core group process supports people in finding out and in enacting as well. And so that, I think, is just another version of what Carolyn has been speaking here. But I just find the process so powerful to respond to that kind of concern in the world. And it might not look anything like, going to a rally or, promoting this or doing that. It's whatever is unique to you. And there are, layer after layer, sometimes to get that really fine tuned. But that again is, what the inner listening and the core group process, or being, with other like-hearted, like-minded people can help you uncover.
Nice. So really, what's mine to do can be very individual. And so I want to do something. We can't do everything. We can't do everything. And a lot of times that gets people overwhelmed and they shut down. Like, well, we got to help the starving people in Africa. We've got to do something about climate change. We got to do something about the political. And we can't do everything, but doing our part is everything. So I love that. I love that feedback. Yeah. Okay.
HeartMath has a term called feeding the field. What are you feeding the field? And when you are doing what you are most deeply called to do or to be, then you are feeding the field in the most effective and powerful way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Any last thing that you didn't get to say that you really want to say to our listeners?
Well, I'm just thinking of Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss. I think that's so important. Follow your bliss.
Okay, Sanford, anything for you?
Follow your bliss. I love Joseph Campbell.
Amen. I do
Thumbs
too.
it right up.
All righty. So our listeners can look at the description in the video. They'll find links to Global Family. If they want to start their own, there's information how to start your own little circle, little group. And I highly recommend the Co-Creators Agreement Handbook too. The Co-Creators Handbook is a jewel of resource, an amazing resource. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks very much.
I appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.